this allows people to kind of All right. Welcome to the People Strategy Forum podcast. We're a show that guides leaders on how to elevate their workplace. We believe that people themselves are at the heart of all successful organizations, and a team member's well-being, their rewards, career development, it's all essential to creating a healthy and happy and highly productive workforce overall. So this show discusses the practical and effective strategies that leaders can implement to help create that perfect place to work. And so today I'd like to introduce to you our hosts. So myself is Sam Reeve. I am a reward strategist. I specialize in compensation. And I'm here with Shar Miller, who is a people strategist. She is a former CHRO of some large healthcare organizations, and she loves to do her own thing. She's got several businesses that she runs. And so it's a pleasure to have her here. She's quite a small business expert on those things. Also, it's a pleasure to introduce our guest today. And so today in the People Strategy Forum, we're thrilled to have Dr. Brian Glibkowski. And he is a founder of Answer Intelligence. And Dr. Glibkowski is not just a celebrated author, but he's also a researcher. He's a visionary into understanding the profound impact in questions and answers that we use in communication. And so we're going to be talking a lot about that today. So his concept is brilliantly captured in his book, Answer Intelligence, Raise Your AQ. AQ is what that is. And so Dr. Glibkowski insights extend beyond academia into practical applications, and his research is being adopted by many prestigious institutions across the globe, matter of fact. So I'm looking forward to hear more about that. So let's welcome Dr. Brian Glibkowski. How you doing, Doc?
Doing well. Thank you, Sam. Sharp. Excited to be with both of you today. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, so before we get started, I know that you have your book, Answer Intelligence. We'd love to hear a little bit more about that and the app that comes with that. But before we get there, we just hear a little bit about your experience? I mean, how did you get to where you are today and helping the people that you help?
Yeah, great question. So a little bit about my background and what I'm doing today. My background's been in and out of academia as a management professor, and I did research on questions and published that in academia. And when I was doing this research, one super obvious thing that we know a lot about questions. So if you think about it, going back to grade school, we learn about the 6 WH questions and open and close questions. Sales and coaching methodologies are based on questions. And it really hit me, we do not have the same level of understanding or focus on the answer side of the equation. Case in point, I mentioned those typologies of answers, 6 WH, open and closed. Outside of my research, there are no typologies of answers. So if I asked you how many answer types are there, you'd get a blank stare. So that really stimulated my interest, and I conducted research with the top golf instructors in the world and came up with the Answer Intelligence framework, 6 answer types that map to questions, concept, metaphor, theory, story, procedure, and action. Wrote a book, did a TEDx, went to market, and we have partners in 19 countries around the world that use Answer Intelligence with their clients. So that's my background and where I'm at in a nutshell.
So let's just start with the first basic thing. I think that some of our readers, our listeners, may have on their minds, just on the 6 WH questions. Can you go through those just to refresh us?
Yeah. So it's why, what, how, when, where, and who. So those are the 6, and those are the questions we use. And there are answer types that map to those different questions.
So can we dig into that a little bit? Can you briefly explain the concept of answer intelligence and its fundamental principles?
Yeah, let me explain what AQ is and give you one example. So answer intelligence is the idea that we can provide elevated answers to important questions. And it's the answer side of the equation where the influence rests primarily. So, for example, let's imagine you're an emerging leader and you have to ask and answer basic questions about leadership for yourself. What is leadership? Why do I lead? How do I lead? And in AQ terms, you connect those questions to answers. So, for example, what is leadership? I could answer that by saying leadership is inspiring others and holding them accountable to achieve a goal. That's a concept answer. It's an answer type. Second, I could say leadership is like two ropes. When the ropes are separate, they're strong. When they're braided together, they're stronger. That's how I lead. Every meeting, I'm going to inspire and hold people accountable. So that's a metaphor answer. So to answer the question, what is leadership? You can provide a concept and or a metaphor answer. And that's basically what AQ is understanding how questions map to answers, identifying the appropriate answers. And when you give the appropriate answers, you have greater influence. And just to punctuate this, imagine as a leader, I'm meeting with a direct report for the first time. They may explicitly ask me, Brian, what's leadership to you? More likely it's going to be implicit. And then if I can deliver those answers, the concept and the metaphor, I'm really setting expectations. I'm influencing the relationship. So that's an example of what AQ is.
So, a lot of times when we think about traditional communication, it seems like we're often thinking about the next question to ask, right? And you're kind of, it seems like you're flipping that on its side there. You're saying that we should really be thinking about the answers first. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's I wouldn't necessarily say one before the other, but I'm saying both are important and answers have been underappreciated. To sort of, I guess, explain my view of questions and answers, it's sort of like a dinner conversation with a friend. So, for your listeners, imagine a recent dinner conversation with a friend, you and one other person. Chances are that conversation has a couple attributes. One, both sides speak about equally, both sides ask and answer questions about equally, both sides care about each other. And that I think underlines my basic idea for conversations. It's about balance. It's about using both sides of the equation. And so if we're only thinking about the question side, we're not, focusing on the answer. You got to do both. So what does that mean? That means you can still start conversations with questions, but there may be times when you start conversations with answers. You tell an interesting story to a team, it sets the context for other questions and answers. So, the overriding message here is both questions and answers are important. We need to do both. And right now, our approach towards communication is frankly simplistic. People don't understand there are answer types. They don't know how they map to questions. So, we just want to bring them up to speed and do both. And it's really a marriage of equals.
So, how does this look like when you're interacting with your clients? And so, how can the AQ approach be implemented effectively? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I'll give you two examples. One in sales, and then one sort of related to more of a people management issue. But in one way or another, we're all selling things. You've heard this expression before. Whether you're a salesperson or you're selling your idea to someone else, one simple thing you can do is challenge a sales organization or challenge your idea you want to sell. Is can you communicate your solution, your product or service in 6 answer types? That's really challenging for people. And you realize pretty quickly that maybe you have a story, but you don't have a metaphor. You need all these answers. And, that's sort of important. Let me give you an example related to people management. Let's say you're coaching a client and maybe you're literally an executive coach and the client is thinking about going back to the office after COVID, right? In AQ terms, you need to be able to ask and answer, basic questions. What does it mean to go back to the office? Why are we going back to the office? How do we go back to the office? And without AQ, we're naturally going to provide some of these answers. So that executive going back to the office, maybe in an all hands meeting, may have a story at the ready that's going to explain why we're going back. Say, remember when we're all in the office in person and blah blah blah. We created this, great idea around the conference table. We're going back to that again. That's wonderful, but in AQ terms, you have to ask and answer all the questions. And you can imagine a scenario where this executive going back to the office might fail to maybe identify a procedure of how they're going back to the office. So someone hears the story and they may say, well, that's great, but how are we going to do it? So the executive might lay out a simple 3-step procedure. Month 1, we're doing this. Month 2, we're doing this. Month 3, we're doing this. And by doing that, what happens? Confidence goes up in the overall going back to the office. And without explaining the procedure, what are people going to say? They're going to say, well, nice story, but they're not really serious about this. They haven't thought through how it's going to work. So in this example, AQ is about being intentional with conversations. And when there's something really important, you want to provide multiple answer types, because like in an all hands meeting, people are for sure going to be thinking about implicit and explicit questions. Why are we going back? How are we going back? What does it mean to go back? Does that mean, we're there, every day of the week? So those are, 2 examples, one in sales and one in a coaching context. But I think listeners could generalize this to other conversations you have. You're asking and answering basic questions, and it's connecting to the appropriate answer types.
So in fact, it's, really making sure that you have those robust answers that are going to address the needs of people you're communicating with.
Yeah.
That definitely makes great sense.
Yeah.
So coming up or brainstorming around the answers is one thing. Now, does the context change? I mean, when we're changing the context, I guess when we're looking at multiple countries and looking or communicating to different demographics, or perhaps using different communication channels. I mean, how does AQ evolve during, when we take those factors into consideration?
Yeah. So, for those that are listening, I'm sure you'll be exposed to a visual. Answer intelligence is a circular framework of 6 answer types. And there's, just to orient you, there's 3 basic questions. The what question relates to concept and metaphor. The why question, theory, which is strategy or story. The how question, procedure, and action. So there's sort of a mapping. Then the when and where is below the entire circle. And it's basically saying every single question, every single answer exists in a context. So the answers may change or vary. So for example, if I'm on a job interview, all else being equal, I'll tell a story. If I'm on a job interview with a bank, all else being equal, a story about me working in a bank is probably better. If the situation changes and now I'm interviewing at a bakery, if I tell a story about being in a bakery. So answers are influenced by context. And in a way, it sort of elevates things from checkers to chess. Now there's more things to think about. There's more things to be aware of. And that we do all this naturally, but AQ sort of provides you a framework to sort of map in these contextual differences. So that's, let me stop there and see if that response makes sense.
It totally does. So when we're thinking about the context there, but I'm just really wondering about your app. I mean, so what was the drive to create the app that goes along with your philosophy?
Yeah, so there's a phone app and then a software platform, and I'll sort of talk about the software platform. Basically, we developed a software platform. It's infused with AI, and I'll give you sort of the benefits of this. With the framework, it allows you to be intentional. But one thing we've discovered is that answers are hard. So imagine, someone asks you, or you're an emerging leader, and I say, what is leadership to you? Give me a concept. Give me a metaphor. Why is leadership important? Give me a story. Give me a theory, cause and effect. Like leadership leads to employee retention, for example. Or I say, give me a procedure of how you're going to lead a meeting or a performance review. Give me a key action that's unique, that's best practice. What we've realized is that answers are hard. And to have a brief digression, answers are actually more difficult than questions. Like I can come up with questions right now, like what's the meaning of life? What are you going to be when you grow up? Those are relatively easy to ask. It's the answers that are always more difficult. So what we found is that there was a gap in that it exposed these weaknesses, or I would love to have these answers. And so what AI does with our software is it serves up different answer sets and options, surveys people can take that give you and expose you to answers. So imagine if you're, to keep it succinct, you're going through a wizard where you're developing your own answers for leadership. And when you get to metaphors, the software serves up 5 metaphors based on different contextual factors that you get to choose from. So it accelerates the process of connecting to answers. And that's really what the software does is this may sound super obvious, but AI has unlimited breadth and depth of knowledge. So we're tapping into that in a structured way through our framework to make sense of it and to better operate in the world.
So in a sense, the app is designed for leaders to use it to craft their communication. So it's a way for them to ramp up and hone their skills as a leader in their professional development.
Exactly. I think with the AQ framework, there's 2 pieces to understand. AQ is a framework, and a framework has principles that you can use to navigate the world. Like before I gave the example of leadership, it's inspiring others, holding them accountable, and then the 2 ropes metaphor. If I gave both utterances at once, that would be high AQ practice 2. It's a technique to answer twice to appeal to the logical and emotional sides of the brain, but you don't always want to answer twice. If I answered every single question twice, it'd be like a monologue. It wouldn't be a conversation. But what I'm getting at is with AQ, there's principles and techniques of highly effective communication that we learn from experts. So one, you have to know that. But then the second piece is you have to know the content. So it's not good enough just to know you need a metaphor for leadership. You have to know what that leadership metaphor is. It's not good enough to know that you need, your employee that's been passed over for promotion. It's not good enough to know that you need to tell them a story. You have to have content. So you bring both together, and that's where you have the really truly impactful communication.
Now, one thing that I'd love to hear from you, Shar. I mean, I know that when we're thinking about communication, it comes in a lot of different forms. I mean, preparing the answers is one, and then of course there's other things such as body language and how we deliver and the setting and so forth. So what's your experience, Shar, and communication in an executive setting?
Well, first of all, I want to say I totally agree with what Brian is talking about. It is pretty fascinating when you work with AI, and it is all about the prompting questions, and then the response take you down different aspects of the questions of detail. So, for example, I typed in "what is talent management strategy," and it came up with all what talent management strategy was and all the different buckets, but it also started digging in deeper and deeper and deeper. And I found that very fascinating of all the aspects of talent management. But absolutely, I mean, I've been in many staff meetings and management meetings and all hands meetings, Brian, as you indicated. And in the room, oftentimes is in silence. Maybe 100 employees or 100 leaders, and that's actually very dangerous, as we all know, when no one's really responding with an answer or really prompting more discussion and dialogue, and the executive is doing all the talking, or the talking heads, really. So unfortunately, I saw a lot of executives doing all hands meetings or, coffee with the CEO, and ended up walking away not really learning anything about the real issues that were on the floor. As an HR professional, I often spent time with the employees at all hours of the day and knew kind of the underneath of what some of the real issues were, and was often disappointed when employees were fearful or felt anxious about really being honest and forthright. Because also with that feedback, it can be a real problem if the executive or leaders in that room don't appropriately follow up. It's like, tattletaling on my boss kind of attitude. And oftentimes that senior person will go running to that leader of that division or that department, say, what the heck is going on? What do you mean that we're having customer service issues here or lack of communication here? Or I don't have, your staff doesn't have the tools and resources to do their job effectively. So it really needs to be a fully mapped out process with all levels of employees and leadership's buy-in about what our communication processes is. And it goes back to the basics of being authentic, transparent, and be able to prepare for those right questions. I know we talk about this all the time, but a leader really needs to do their homework. I love your methodology of doing that, to walk into that employee meeting with a vision of exactly what kind of information do we need to extract from our employees and leaders in this meeting. You know, what is our goal? And if that meeting is not effective, we need to come up with a different approach. I also want to say I love your hands-on just-in-time methodology of having an app or something on the database. Often leaders don't have the ability to do the homework prior to a meeting. So you're giving them the tools and resources to do that quickly and efficiently. So my question for you, Brian, is do you find a lot of leaders resistant to this approach? Do you find leaders understanding that this is really vital to be able to have more in-depth communication and find the whys and the whats of the answers? What do you think of that acceptance by leaders?
Yeah, great question. This may not be surprising, but the acceptance is high. And I'll tell you why. There's a lot of frameworks that are out there. You know, you're a purple cow, you're a 5-star, you're this and that. I won't pick exact frameworks. I don't want to put any framework down. But what AQ is simple questions and answers. Who is going to doubt that, those 6 questions, these answers, we use them, and it's a natural language overlay to any topic. So the executives, no one wants to learn a million frameworks. So this is simple. So there's acceptance there. They like the framework of simplicity, but then they also realize that they have things to learn and they need to improve, and there's a skill they can improve on. There's a platform, like you're saying, you have just-in-time answers. So people are very receptive. And just pointing out in terms of things to learn, we have an AI infused test. Our entire platform is that will basically, you give it a prompt and say, my employee is struggling with turnover, with they're passed over for promotion. And the AI will serve up a topic. It'll say motivation. Then it'll serve up 3 question types: why, what, and how. You simply have to map, given the question type, what answer type you would use, story, metaphor, theory, etc. Anyways, we have this tool, and on average, the score is, slightly below 50% correct. People are not aware of how questions and answers map. So the getting to the longer answer, back to the short one, people think it's valuable. They realize they don't know how to do it. It's relatively easy to sort of upskill, and people are very receptive. So that's my answer to your question.
So when you interact with your clients, I mean, are they, so is it typically are you using the app and as part of a coaching program, or are you kind of interfacing with learning and development organizations that help create programs around the content? What's the most common approach?
Yeah, so primary go-to-market through professional service firm partners that do coaching, training, and consulting for any topic. But enterprises, they can contact us as well. But yeah, they're using the software in the context of coaching, training, and consulting. So, for example, one of our partners in Slovakia had a client, large insurance firm, that wanted to use AQ, and the first group that was interested was the cybersecurity group. And the partner in Slovakia, frankly, doesn't know anything about cybersecurity. I don't know anything about cybersecurity, but we use the software to generate an answer set of all the different answer types: story, metaphor, theory, concept, etc., and had a push button output to 20 PowerPoint slides. And we simply put a cover slide on, and we said to the cybersecurity firm, these are the answers you're going to get in a training. And they were sold because, you know what? They didn't have alignment around those answers. As an internal service of cybersecurity, we showed them 3 different definitions of cybersecurity, different metaphors, dimensions of how you break it down. And you know what happened? They were disagreeing. And that was the point. If you don't have alignment on what something is, why you do it, how you do it, how are you going to be consistent? How are you going to communicate to others? So, they were sold on that. But, going back to how it's used, it's, there's coaching, consulting, and training applications depending on what the partners do.
So the I guess the one thing that we've talked about a lot of things here, just the AQ and how it's used in general communications from a leadership perspective and coaching around the platform and so forth. But if organizations want to use this to build more cohesive teams, could they use it in that context or around individuals that may not be directly in leadership?
Yeah, I think AQ can be focused, on any topic. So obviously there's things that you do within teams that you could focus on, but even getting your grips around what teamwork is, you getting alignment around what we define it as, why it's important, or how we do it, and then you can get into more specific details, thereof. But it's a way to get alignment around any topic. So maybe I could, take it out of teams because the content is important, and right off the top of my head, and uh, I have a great example to give you. But let's switch it up and say instead of teams, imagine you want to create mentoring within your company. Okay, so in AQ terms, you can create alignment around what mentoring is, why you do it, how you do it, and say you go through this exercise, answers are spit out. At the end of the day, you come to alignment on like what it is. You could say mentoring is, helping others to become their better future selves at work. And it consists of 3 dimensions: career support, social support, and role modeling. Now we're getting alignment on this. It's not other things, it's what this is. Now you have a metaphors to explain it. And then you can see like the natural progression where people are going to start to ask questions like, how do I do mentoring? Or how do I do social support? I kind of know what the concept is, but how do I do it? And then you go through the software and it starts to spit out different answers. And you might come to like an example of a procedure. Let me tell you about a 3-step procedure to provide social support. Open door policy procedure. Step 1, your door is open. Step 2, you invite someone in and you ask them, is this going to take less than 5 minutes? If so, you meet. Is it going to take more than 5 minutes? You schedule another meeting. So step 3 would be the actual meeting or scheduling something else. And bringing this back to social support, there's like task support and social support. Task support is like how do I fill out my TPS report or something like that, or some kind of project plan or something like that. And that's less emotionally taxing. But social support is emotionally taxing. If I'm having a fight with some other teammate or I feel less confident, the thing with social support is you want to provide it exactly when you need it. So that's why you do the open door policy and meet right when you can. So the picture I'm painting here is you're creating a multi-dimensional view of what mentoring is, how you do it, connecting to the appropriate answers. So if we're focused on teamwork, you do a similar exercise and understand the appropriate answers, and you begin to have an indwelling in those, you begin to use those, and it really is a transformative thing from just sort of having some vague sense of teamwork to having a crystallized sense of teamwork around all the answers, connected to the important questions, and you're ready to go.
It's great. So Brian, I mean, and overall, I mean, when you're working with your clients and so forth, and especially in the past 6 months or so, have you found that there's any prevailing trends that are particularly important in your line of work?
Yeah, I think the importance of communications accelerating, and even taking the trend line back a little bit. Basically going back to when COVID happened, we had virtualization, we had remote teams, we had Zoom. Those all put a premium on communication. Meetings are shorter. We got to be better, more effective. So that sort of started the process. And then AI came, another interrupt from a communication standpoint. There's this threat out there that AI is going to take your job. AI can communicate well. So you have to be even better. So we can leverage AI, but it's putting a further premium on effective communication. And we see this just accelerate. That's one trend, is the importance of communication is only accelerating. Second is, it's sort of related to, virtualization and degree of change. Change is increasing, and we have to be, better communicators and and that's been sort of accelerating the need for something like AQ because the content of things are changing. So imagine we got product launch 1, product launch 2, or whatever you're doing, it's accelerating. Every time we do a product launch, we have to communicate better. Every time we do a reorg, we have to communicate better. And so it just seems like generally the pace of everything is accelerating. And given any kind of change, you have to be able to communicate better. So those are the two big I guess trends, if I wanted to point out two, that we see in the marketplace.
When you're looking, you were talking about AI being a big a big factor this year, of course, and how it's being introduced to business and so forth. I mean, it's just been a huge boom this year, and I know that you're incorporating this into your tool. In the how can this help customize communication in the future? I mean, as you can imagine, when leaders are brainstorming on their approach, and there's some common themes that are coming up because of the cultural aspect of their organization or their people or their country that they're in. Does your tool kind of over time customize the approach of how it's answering questions or helping guide the brainstorming process with leaders?
Yes, I think the way the AI works is you can sort of get content from the general pool of OpenAI, let's say, whatever they have access to. Then you can also do specific training related to localized content. So right now we're focused sort of on the general AI platform, but starting to do some more localized content. So you can make it more and more specific, more useful for you. Then you have an inventory of answers, hundreds of answers. You can sort of survey this and do things like that. So that's very helpful. The other thing I'll say with AI that I think is particular to our platform, but any platform, one insight I was, like when AI first came on the forefront, I was thinking, oh, do we need AQ? We have AI. But the reality, because AI is questions and answers in a sense, and AQ is questions and answers. But the reality is, what you understand once you really dig into, the neural networks and all that stuff, is that, just underscoring a point that we all know, is that AI, is a natural language model. It produces results, but it does it in a way that's different than the way our brain works. It's a neural network, but it's different. So basically, the insight we had with our platform is we're using AQ to structure input and output from AI with the algorithms we've created, and it does this in a coaching, consulting, and training context. And so I would encourage people going forward to use AQ as a humanistic framework for communication that can help make sense of AI. And for those of you that are naysayers about this, I'll just give you one specific point. In natural language models, you can ask a question. You can do this like with AI right now. It's like ChatGPT or something. Like young kids children ask questions like how. And they say how every time. But sometimes they mean what or why. So what this means in natural language models, if you ask a what question or a how question, you're not always going to map it to the proper answer types in AQ terms, because you have to understand the mapping. So, we have like smoothing algorithms and things that sort of map this out. But what a picture I'm trying to paint here is AI is something you can leverage, but you have to have a human communication framework to make sense of it. And so that's where our clients, I think, are leveraging a lot of value, is they're basically saying communication is these questions and answers. I get my head wrapped around that. And then you go to AI and sort of inventory, content. But if you don't do that, you could feel like, like without any bearings. You're just sort of like searching in AI. It's overwhelming for someone by themselves to do it. Now imagine an organization trying to make sense and use AI. So anyways, I'm meandering, I think, to my point here, but I'm trying to say that, AQ can be a humanistic lens for human to human communication, but also human to AI communication.
Well, I'm just seeing huge applications. I mean, we're talking about if you have managers or leaders from the business that are interacting with this tool, and sometimes even with those 5 questions, leaders can be unaware of other initiatives that are going on across the organization.
Yeah.
And if that knowledge is pooled together and it prompts that leader says, well, matter of fact, over in R&D or over in finance or over in human resources, they're talking about this, something that you should be concerned about in your communication or your answers. So, I mean, it just seems like a great way to, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, let me respond to that. I think you hit the nail on the head. What we're talking about, I think, was intentional communication, intentional questions and answers, but also intentional inventory of answers. So you have access to them. And just to underscore, I think the point you're making about the lack of intentionality, sort of related to sort of another example. Char talked before about meetings. We've all been in meetings where it just seems to go nowhere. Like Susan tells a story, John tells a story, Mark tells a story, the meeting's over. It sort of feels like we've gone someplace, but we haven't gone anyplace. In AQ terms, what's happening is we're not asking and answering all the questions. We're not intentionally navigating from one question, one answer to another. And it's just sort of like we're adrift without a rudder. So now imagine a meeting, and we have partners that, for example, that do boardroom facilitation that systematically map through all the answer types. That's intentional, as opposed to just letting a meeting happen and people just say whatever they want to say. And I think all of us would agree we've experienced sort of this rudderless communication, and AQ is basically giving you a rudder, a structure to navigate.
Well, I 100% agree with that. I think in all the staff meetings, particularly when I have my own company with my staff, it's a simple thing of having a plan or an agenda, a simple agenda. I often seen times where employees would vent to their leader about whatever working conditions or various hiccups in the organization. And the leader would often respond and say, yeah, I'll bring that up at the management meeting. Yeah, I'll bring that up at the whatever meeting. And then, so everybody walks into the room with their own separate agenda about what they want to accomplish from that meeting and what they want to resolve and fix, including the executives have certain agendas, certain plans, without even having that rudder, as you say, and having an actual plan about what questions we're going to ask, what issues are we going to address. And I often see parking, they called it parking lot, right? Parking lot, parking lot, parking lot, parking lot. But then the parking lot never happened. It ended up being like a highway, roadblock,
Yeah.
And then when the leader comes back and the employees would say, did you address this working condition matter? The leader would say, well, that's going to be at the next meeting. So the employees often saying, well, you're just sitting in all these meetings. You're not really addressing our problems here. So what do you guys do in those meetings all day? Just sit and listen to each other? I mean, I have heard this conversation time and time and time again with no real action or results. And that's very frustrating to the organization and the culture. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah. And underscore your point, just to give you like more details on that conversation, the meeting you're in. So if you're a proper facilitator, you take Susan's story and you say, well, that's a great story. Let's identify what the key idea is, or key concept. Was that about change? Was that about mentoring? Then you get alignment on that. Then you say, okay, what's a key action we can do in our next mentoring session? So you're connecting the dots between the different answer types, as opposed to just sort of drifting or staying in one answer type. And related to that, give another metaphor, besides the rudder, another sort of concept of, navigation is GPS. GPS is about triangulation of 3 points. So I like to say a minimal conversation and substantive is going to be a triangulation of 3 answer types, and maybe story, concept, action. But if you just stay in one answer type, we have no idea, if we're even aligned. But think about it. If you tell a story, then we agree on that, whatever it is. You go to a concept, we agree, and we go to an action. The chances of us not having some degree of alignment goes down considerably, because we've triangulated the answers in our understanding.
Well, I know that we've talked about a lot of things here, but where is the future of answer intelligence going? I mean, what do we want our listeners to remember and think about for the future?
In the future, I'll give you 2 for future points. The future of tomorrow, like literally, and the future, X months from now, the way things are going, not years, months. future for tomorrow is, each person listening right now wants to be a more effective communicator for something. So if you're an emerging leader or a salesperson, you have your topics. Let's say you're an emerging leader, challenge yourself to develop 6 answers for leadership for yourself. And then that's a simple. You can learn more about AQ, but that's simple. Now I'll talk about the tomorrow, the future, looking at the future. This could be months, or years, but I think it's about leveraging AI and helping us accelerate. So whatever the metaphor is you want to use, you could think of like a race car. AI is the car, helps us go faster, but the human is, behind the wheel. But there's things AI can do that enable us in a way that we can't do. So imagine, here's the setup. Imagine if you do a leadership training and you come out of it, you're a servant leader. Now you can, with AI, you could have specific conversations in the foreground, like performance management. And you say, what are the answers for those? But then you say, let's consider servant leadership simultaneously as we provide those answers. So not only am I doing performance management, but I'm doing it as a servant leader. So what you're getting is layering context in a way that AI can connect to, in a way that's in effect better than humans, because we can't always think about all the contextual factors as humans, but you can triangulate these with AI. So it's going to allow for just profound changes to how we navigate in the world. So think about it in this sense. Imagine if your company has a culture. Every company does. We're going to focus on our culture. Now with AI, like a laser beam, everything we do, the next team meeting, the next performance management, the next brainstorming session, can always consider context. It will always be influenced by it. So it's going to be a game changer as the AI systems develop and decision support systems develop. It's going to be just amazing.
We have a question from one of our listeners that he asked that if he says, I think that the future is going towards creating simulated work environments for coaching and real-time analytics. So, and I've heard about that in other tools as well. I mean, as far as having a feedback sections with AI and so forth to try to make the actual engagement better. So what are your thoughts on this and using AQ in this context?
Yeah, absolutely. We already have some applications. You can imagine like role playing. Questions get served up at you, what kind of answers you provide. The system can provide answers. You can compare those to sort of best practices. So that's absolutely going to happen. One of the applications we have right now that I think is sort of intriguing is we have AI simulate questions and answers. So there's sort of like a viewer approach where you can say, I'm having trouble with motivating an employee, and it'll simulate questions the employee may ask and answers you can provide. So it's a safe environment where you can sort of watch this simulated conversation unfold, rate different questions and answers. So yeah, simulations, all this stuff is going to be happening, and we're using it. And yeah, I totally agree with the audience member who raised this point.
Well, perfect. Lots of stuff to think about today there, Brian. So if our listeners want to learn more and contact you and maybe they want to implement the product in their organization, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so thank you for that. You can find me on LinkedIn, Brian Glibkowski. I'm the only one. You can go to our website, raiseyouraq.com. You can fill out a contact form, and also mention there's a free AQ exploration test that's generated by AI that will challenge you to see if you can properly map questions and answers for any topic. So I encourage you to take that free test as well.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I'll have to go over there and try it out. Well, thank you, Brian, for spending time with us today and our listeners. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Char. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Take care. All right. Bye, everyone, and see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. Take care.